Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to find exclusive insights, real stories, and practical ideas from people who are solving real problems in the world. My name is Prosper, and I'm your host today. But this show is for you if you've ever felt disconnected from your identity, your purpose, or maybe just the deeper meaning behind the work that you do. Because today's episode speaks directly to that feeling of how culture, curiosity, and storytelling can help us rediscover who we really are. So if you enjoy conversations that make you think differently about life, business, and purpose, make sure you subscribe on whatever platform that you're listening to this on so you never miss an episode. And today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Mthulisi Khumbula. Now, Mthulisi, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Prosper. Thank you for having me on the show. It's an incredible privilege and honor to be here with you. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. But just before we continue on that one, you skipped my middle name. I don't know if you're scared to pronounce it wrongly.
I didn't know how that goes because you've already told me your background is not shown. So I didn't know. Is that any Xiao, any Liao, or what is that? How do you say your middle name?
So it's pronounced Inacio.
Inacio, right. Okay, maybe we will jump into that and then you can tell me. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I stand corrected, this is Mr. Mthulisi Inacio Khumbula, who is the founder of Rwendo, a platform dedicated to building African pride and enhancing lives and livelihoods. And obviously, today's conversation is going to feel a little bit like a documentary because we're going to be exploring identity, culture, purpose, and the quiet courage it actually takes to pursue something meaningful when people around you don't always understand it. As you have noticed, I've already started mincing my words and I didn't even know how to say his middle name. So I'm going to stand back and let the men, the myth, and the legend, do a little bit of justice to, first of all, his name, his heritage, and everything else that comes along with it. Now, Mthulisi, I've already introduced you to the show, and for fear of not being able to sound your middle name again, let's start with this. You actually describe yourself as a young person with an old soul. That kind of sounds like somebody who listens to a lot of wisdom podcasts while everybody else is listening to party music. Could you explain to us how you came, up with that conclusion?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a mixture of things. The first source or the first time I ever thought about that was in conversation with my parents. So, I always talk to them, share with them thoughts, ideas. And one thing that my father, we had many conversations last year, and he kept on saying to me, be young, be your age. I mean, I'm turning 25 this year. So he was saying, you're 24, be 24. When you're 30, be 30. And that's when I first started to notice, okay, I mean, what are these guys talking about? Because we're always told to be forward looking and forward thinking with the things that we do. We're always told to be proactive, have a plan. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? So when I then took that and put it in practice and started to share those thoughts and ideas and plans, I just found it ironic that now I'm being told to be young. So that brings the question, what do you mean be young? Now, my dad obviously told me, he said, it doesn't mean be reckless. It doesn't mean go out there and do crazy things or stupid things, but you must take advantage of the time, the energy that you have, and the period in which your life has more flexibility, if we can call it. So it was from that first point where I saw that, okay, my mom and my dad are saying this to me. Then I started to speak to other people. You can call them mentors or all the people that I was in conversation with. And most times we would just talk for some period of time, and later on they say, "Oh, so how old are you?" or something in passing. My age will just come up, and they're like, Wait, you're not 28, you're not 27." I'm like, no, like, why would you think I'm, that age? So that again cropped up. Now, if we take it away from people, I mean, I like music. A lot of the music that I listen to is also older music. So going back to our roots, if we look at Zimbabwe, one of my favorite artists is Marshall Munumumwe. That
Oh,
is something I love. If you look at Thomas Mapumo, I love
right.
his music. Funny enough, I was not always a big fan of Oliver Mtukudzi. I don't know why. Although I'm actually, or I was related to it, which is funny in the end. But yeah, so Marshall Munumume, Thomas Mapumo, and these are old artists. If you look at the Sungura as a genre, this is an old genre. Not many of my friends listen to that. So that's another example. And I also wish I was born in a time where we didn't have so much technology. So
Mm.
there's just these different things, but without wanting to go off on a tangent, I think I've given you just a few examples of how I arrived at this conclusion of, being an old soul, I guess.
Absolutely. I would say the same. I mean, even when I was growing up, I grew up around the time when Marshall Munumumu and them were obviously, legends by then. So you can only imagine you being 25 right now and listening to that. That should say quite a lot. But, you know, I always joke around and also say, I didn't even know how to write my name until I was 30. You know what I mean? And you're saying you'd already started doing all of these things. And now you're telling me you're actually 25. I mean, did you grow up in the same Zimbabwe that I grew up in? Because this is a whole different, look and feel of a person. Like your journey starts off in Zimbabwe, then you move to Mauritius, and somewhere along the way, curiosity, communication, and people came together, and now you've become this person that you are today. Let's just unpack that journey a little bit. What was life like growing up for you as a kid, just so that I have a bit of context as to um, how you became who you became?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, and I don't know why, but the memories are slowly coming back. So I grew up with both my parents. Like I said, I was born in Harare. I
Uh-huh.
went to Twin Rivers Primary School. That's in Belgravia. And that was, I had an amazing time at Twin Rivers when I look back at it. I was always quite drawn to sports. I started swimming quite early. I played hockey, I played tennis, and my favorite sport was cricket, which I started also at a very young age. I don't know if it was like less under 10 years old, I think, when I started playing cricket. Um, yeah. What else about my childhood? I think you'd have to ask maybe some specific questions. I don't really see any pivotal things that happened in my upbringing or in my childhood that I would say uh, growing up. But I then went to St. George's College for my high school. That was quite a unique experience in that I had been to a co-ed school, learning with boys and girls at primary school, and then going to a boys' school. That was an experience on its own. My parents did separate in when I was 12 or 13 years old, and maybe I was trying to avoid that, but that's probably something big that had an impact on me because I then had a bit of a turbulent time in my early or mid high school years, let's say from Form 1 to Form 4. Uh, but then with time, I later, I guess, accepted things. I later came into my own and started to discover myself as a person. I wasn't very much of an academic, but once again, still played sport. But the condition at St. George's was you could only play one sport at a time. You had to
Mm.
specialize. And so I continued with cricket. Um, and for the sports I had played, I had always been in the A team since primary school. So in second term, we played hockey. And Form 1, I was in the A team. Form 2, I was demoted to the B team. And I never played a B team sport in my life before. And I didn't get the opportunity to audition on the day because there was a situation where they were taking players off, putting players on so that they could play a match. And then the coaches would see who's good enough. I didn't get a chance to play. And that broke me. And the coach said something to me. He said, if you're a diamond, you will shine, you know. And I said, okay. But I was very disheartened by that. Later, they then made me captain of the B team. And I said to myself, you're never going to promote your captain.
Mm.
So I dropped hockey because I didn't want to play a BT sport. I started playing squash, and that was in Form 2. So squash didn't have a first team, second team. It just had A, B, C, D, E, and about 5 to 6. So I started at the bottom of the E team in Form 2. And by the end of upper six, I was the best player at Saints. But I did not become captain, which was another heartbreaking thing. So I think my time at St. George's actually had a lot of loss and rejection. I was a prefect at primary school. I did not end up becoming a prefect at high school. So these are moments that really broke me because where I felt I had what it took and where those had been my ambitions from an early time in Form 1, those things were not, they did not materialize.
Mm.
Besides sport, I was quite active in the cultural activities. So I did debate, I did Model United Nations, I did Toastmasters, I did public speaking. But ironically, I've always done better at the impromptu speeches rather than the prepared speeches. And that actually is where the foundations of my self discovery lie. Because I'll just, okay, that's now coming into more present day. But your question was how I grew up. So that's kind of the main memories I have back from primary school and high school. If you have any questions there, I'm happy to answer. But those
Absolutely.
moments are probably the ones that shaped me the
Absolutely, and
most.
thank you so much for taking us through that, because it opens us up to a few more doors that I might just want to explore, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The fact that you were disheartened by you not taking leadership roles in terms of being a prefect, in your high school or in the sports teams that you ended up taking. My question to that is, was there any expectation, especially coming from the parentals or the parents, sorry, the parents, for you to actually excel in any of the endeavors that you were assigned to or you undertook?
There were no expectations per se, and definitely not in the sporting sense.
Mhm.
My parents are quite different in that my dad always said a man can do no more than his best, whereas my mother typically wanted me to be at the top of the class
Right.
or to do well. So it was more on the academic front for my mom. But they were both very supportive, but no expectations. It wasn't like you need to do this for you to be worthy or anything. So they didn't really have expectations of me, but were more open to me doing whatever it is I wanted to do and supporting me in that.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, when support is there, then it actually nurtures that which we want to be and more. You did mention A levels. Which denominations did you end up partaking, or what sort of side of the? Because there's always three, right? There's science, there's commercials, and then there's arts. Which direction did you take?
I would say it was mainly commercials, maybe with a bit of arts. So for my AS levels in lower six, I had business studies, geography, design and technology, and English. For my A levels, I ultimately had business studies, geography, and design and technology. I believe it was those three at the end.
Absolutely. And obviously with that, did that take you to university or is that when your journey started, when you started traveling?
Yeah, so there's actually that's funny because my degree had nothing to do with my A levels, and which is very funny because I did my bachelor's degree in accounting and finance.
Right.
actually. So, and if you had told me in high school that I'll end up studying accounting and finance, I would have laughed at you, and wouldn't have really believed you, because I didn't think I was capable of something like that. It seemed like a difficult topic to me. At the time, I had applied to study logistics and supply chain management. Then my aunt one day she just asked me, "So what do you want to study?" And I told her. Then she said, "Why?" I guess she wasn't impressed with my answer. And she said, Mofunga is a finance. Think about finance. Look into that. She sent me some resources. I said, okay, whatever. At the same time, I had a small business with one of my friends. Durags?
Oh yeah, that was the
So we were
craze.
making those and selling them in high school. And we had made quite a bit of money. At the time, this was 2018, 2019, we had made over $1,000, selling these. And
Wow.
that's a lot of money for that time, right? And uh, I was always very interested in how much did this cost? Where did we get this? And I'll just write things down. But now, when my aunt suggested this, I looked for if the university I'd applied to had an accounting or finance qualification. When I was reading through it, I got intrigued by it. And when I actually read the book Accounting for Dummies, just so I could understand what is accounting about. Uh, and I realized the things I had been doing was pretty much accounting,
Mm.
actually, but not in the same way, not in the technical way. Uh, but what also inspired me to read Accounting for Dummies was from that $1,000, when I was looking at the sales, we only had about $20 in cash, which didn't make sense to me.
Where did the rest of the money
So,
go?
exactly. Spending it on food. That was weird. So that's how I then switched my major and actually started to do accounting and finance. So it has nothing to do with my A levels at
Mm.
all.
But
It
he would
was
have
nothing.
stemmed, at least from like the business studies, would have sort of, gotten you intrigued a little bit with that sort of genre of work. But and congratulations on, moving forward and everything else. So you then um tell us about the time between obviously university up until you left to go to Mauritius.
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually studied in Mauritius. So when I left Zimbabwe after my A levels, that was 2019. We then had COVID 2020, and then I left Mauritius to study. Uh, but I can just share part of that experience with you if you don't mind about my time at university.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's not a big sporting scene at the universities in Mauritius, at least at the one I went to. So it's mainly just the academics, but there was the finance club, which I joined because my lecturer was the staff member in charge of that club. And we had a few events. So I then also joined this program called the Future FinTech Champions Program, which is run by Mauritius Africa FinTech Hub. Now, it's an independent organization, but they take people, a few students from each of the universities, and then you have to host events on your campus and choose different themes around fintech uh, that you wanted to talk about. So we hosted some events, and for one of those, I was the MC. Now, I didn't really prepare for that, but I enjoyed it, and we had guests. For example, on the panel, there were some guests from some financial institutions. So it was good to be in proximity with those types of people and with the students being the audience. And that's the first time I kind of felt like that was good. Okay, that was interesting. I was at the debate club. I was in the, I was there were some debates in the finance club, and often there was one which I won best speaker, and our team also won. So outside of the academics, there was these things that were happening in the background, which all have a common thread, which we will address throughout the rest of our time together today. But yeah, that was mainly my time at university. I did put in a lot of work because it was my first time learning accounting. So I
Mm.
actually told my teacher, I remember in my first year, I sent an email and said, Madam, Uh, I have never done accounting before. I'm scared that I'm going to fail. What do I do? And she paired me with one of the other students who ended up being one of my closest friends during the time I was studying. I had amazing teachers. And again, you're asking what shaped me. In Zimbabwe, I don't blame the teachers. Maybe I was also going through something, but I was never really looked at as a someone who had potential, or maybe only by a few teachers, but for the most part, it was really people who didn't have faith in me and who didn't believe in what I could do. But the teachers in Mauritius, at the university I learned at, they called me intelligent. They told me I could do it. This is someone who had never studied accounting before, or finance. And typically, someone who studies that needs a background in mathematics. I highly advise that, you know, a background in mathematics and maybe economics. But I didn't have any of that. But still, these ladies were telling me, not even ladies, the head of faculty was a man, and I wanted to change my course from accounting and finance to banking and finance at one point, which is more quantitative or mathematical. And he looked at my grades and said, "Yeah, no problem, you can do this." I didn't end up changing my major, but that was an example of someone believing in me. So this was all very interesting the first time it happened, and my performance improved. I was getting distinctions in some of these subjects, whereas back in high school, I hadn't even done extended mathematics at O levels. So there's so many different things that happened, with these teachers, and it changed everything. It changed everything, and I started to believe in myself more. That helped me perform better and just helped me be more positive about my outlook on life and everything. So that's my main experience during university, with great teachers, some of the extracurricular activities, which are similar to the ones that I also did in high school, if you notice.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely, and
that's a
obviously,
bit
yeah,
about my experience at university.
absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing that, because I think if if anything, if you're supported or if people believe in you, you first of all borrow their belief in yourself, and then you start using that for your own in order for you to be successful. And obviously, by you experiencing that, that actually helped you excel. But it was run about this time when you actually left Zimbabwe that you mentioned that you started to appreciate culture more deeply. What was that made you realize that something was maybe missing, or you now wanted to be the person to restore whatever that which was missing for you?
Okay, so two things on that one, Prosper. Number one, you were talking about support. I would like
Mm.
to just talk about my sister. She is half my age. She just turned 13 in November last year. From the time that she was small, I have poured so much support and belief into that young lady, and it has made all the difference in who she is today. I have a video when she was barely 8 years old telling me about the business she wants to establish, about a
Wow.
fashion business. She went on to make dresses and clothes for her dolls using socks, and she had all of these things. When I used to talk to my mom a lot about my ideas, my sister would be in the room, and then she would start asking questions, and I would answer as if she was an adult. And I've
Right.
always told her, "You can do everything, you can do everything." And she today, I mean, she is a straight A student.
Mm-hmm.
She made the national team for water polo. She plays for Zimbabwe. She is doing public speaking. She was playing hockey and she's won prizes there. That's just a few examples. And I strongly believe that it is because of just telling her, you can do it. You can even go to the Olympics. You can even do this. You can even do that. And so that support, like you're saying, I don't want to just brush past it and go on to the next point, because it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. And she's a living testament to that. But at the same time, maybe she's also just incredibly talented on her own, and it had nothing to do with me. I'm open to that one as well. But you asked now about when I started getting interested in African pride, and it's not a typical. It's not as beautiful as it would seem, uh, because my background was never like that. You know, in a Zimbabwean context, most people would call me Msalad. You know, and
I
that's
was
a
about
term
to,
that I
I was
hate.
about to, I was about to go there, but I was just like, who is this
No,
kid?
you should. And you should. I want you to, like, let's just be real and let's be honest. Whatever's on your mind, I'm really open to. Yeah,
Right.
most people would call me that, right? And that's true. I am at this point embarrassed that I speak more fluent English than Shona. That is a problem. And but my gift is in communication, not in English. So I know if I do the work, I can just be even more fluent in Shona.
Mm.
So I don't know if you saw the article that I wrote on my LinkedIn. I wrote an article titled "Hypocrisy," where I detailed my background, how the schools I went to, the worldview I had. I never used to listen to Sungura music
You
in
see,
high
when
school.
you started talking about Masha Moon, I was just like, oh, are we just trying to connect or what?
You know, it's very different. Yeah,
Yeah, right. I would have seen
exactly.
you bitty bobbing
Music
and
that we would look Yeah, I would look at that type of music and be like, maybe if I don't say anything about it, I just wouldn't listen to it, right?
right.
So,
So why do you think? I mean, obviously, you've gone on to build a platform that helps with restoring that sort of African pride. But why do you think pride and identity is such an important conversation right now?
without your identity, you're nothing. You know, without your identity, you don't have anything. I think we can just start there. For example, uh, are you a man or a woman? That's a big conversation going around today, and uh, I believe that this you're either a man or you're either a woman, right? This is either a blue pen or it's a red pen.
Mm.
Without it, what is the color? Green, yellow, so many different ones. But if all of them were black and white, what would happen there? So that's just an example of how an identity of something. What color is it? What shape is it? It makes a big difference. Now, to be specific about our culture or who we are as Africans, you obviously know our history as a continent, which we were ravaged by things like colonization. I was actually
Yes.
talking to one of my friends recently who's also interested in this, and we are talking about names and how when people were colonized, some of them had their names changed to, you know, Johnson or the English names. Now, if we remove the address from your letter, do you know where to take it? You don't. And that's just like a name. So if I go to Mozambique today and I just start saying Kumbula, 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 I'll get somewhere. And that can link me to my people. But if we remove that name, you don't know where to start. You don't know, are you Cameroonian? Are you Nigerian? And I've never done these DNA tests that they have out there. I don't know how they actually trace nationality, but identity just tells us who we are, where do we come from, what did we do, and that in itself gives you belonging. When you have belonging, you start to have some kind of security, some kind of assurance. So if I go to Zimbabwe today, I'm going to walk into my mother's house or my grandmother's house because that's where I come from. I'm going to just open the gate and come in. But if I don't have a home, I'm going to knock on the door gently. I'm going to try and ask if you can let me in and do this. And all of that then it influences your behavior. So identity gives you confidence. When you know, this is my name, this is my home, this is where I come from, this is my father, this is my mother, this is my bloodline, this is where we come from, this is what we're doing, this is my idea. Without your identity, without knowing who you are, and always just having others' platforms to build on, you are quite insecure. So I don't know if I've answered your question. It's quite a
Oh,
abstract
absolutely.
topic.
It is.
But
It
yeah.
is. but I like the attempt. The attempt is what really is intriguing me right now, because from what you're saying, if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you belong, you don't know how to act in certain scenarios and situations, and that disempowers you to be to and have a happier existence. And I can see that, especially for people that live in areas like where I'm at right now. It's very, very difficult for people to align with who they were in fear of who they're becoming. And that disconnect is now, manifesting in their kids, in the way they operate and who they show up, the jobs they accept, or what they accept as remuneration, because their identity has been diluted. So
Exactly.
it's a very important topic, but
and that's why I didn't want you to rush over the name at the start of the interview, because that would have eliminated the common thread I have to my roots in Mozambique. The name I have, Inacio, was also my grandfather's name, and he was born in Mozambique. That's how I end up in Zimbabwe, because his father told him, you need to go and learn English. Now, funny enough, I was with some Mozambicans just yesterday. I met them yesterday, and we were talking about the country. The man told me that they only start learning English in secondary school. So the reason why you see most Portuguese countries in Africa are quite isolated is because they don't have that, let's say, bilingual nature. So, and I don't know what the other education systems are like in other countries, but that is just an example. So that's why they come back to my grandfather, which now made sense. When I spoke to these Mozambicans, they said you only learn English in high school. Then I'm like, oh, that may be why my grandfather was told to go to Zimbabwe. Maybe so that he could go and actually learn English. And that was the reason he came. That's where he meets my grandmother on the border between Zimbabwe and Mozambique, because she was born in Chipinge. So without that, I would still be in Mozambique, and my life would look completely different. But I was born in Zimbabwe, but my roots are there. So that does something to you. You have to look at that history. It does influence you. It really does.
Because once you accept who you are, it also puts you at a station in life. You've mentioned a bit of that. I mean, obviously, maybe it's not part of your language, but the fact that I've seen this whenever Zimbabweans meet, there's a couple of questions that we ask each other. What hood did you grow up in? What school did you go to? Even without going to that extreme, but I had to extrapolate that out of you somehow when I was like, so tell me how you were brought up, because I was listening to the way you're talking and the concepts of what you're talking, because for somebody who was brought up in the way that some of us were brought up, identity is not urgent. What's urgent is survival. What's urgent is, what do I eat today and how do I get by? But when you now have ascended in, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're now looking at your identity, and that's when I started asking the questions. Like, you must have been a salad, bruh.
That's a very interesting perspective that you've given, because when I do look at it from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for sure, for you to have the time or the ability to think about this, you do have to have something's covered, because I know some people don't even get to ask themselves, what color shirt do I wear today? That's not even a factor. Yeah.
And the fact that you had schools that were that stable that you would have some sort of hierarchy that was also being
I want to push back a bit on that point that you've made, and this is a conversation that is not had enough, and I hope that we can talk again in future. I really do, because there's a lot. I believe that there's a disconnect between us and society. Now, classism is everywhere in the world. But masala, ghetto, it's counterproductive. And we actually stand to gain and learn a lot from one another. At St. George's, I learned about, I don't know, Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, these people, but I never learned one thing about Zimbabwe.
True.
One thing,
That's
right?
true.
So there's that. At my primary school, if you're caught speaking in Shona, you are fined,
Yeah.
right? That's another thing. So if we could create, I don't know why I know IGCSE is an English educational system. I don't know, I'm not an expert on this area, but why do we have English systems dominating schools in our country? Because that means that the curriculum has to be approved in London, not in Harare or in Bulawayo or whatever, right? You can learn French at St. George's College. It's a subject choice. But can you learn Ndebele? No, it's not offered. Now, is
No.
that a school thing or is that a governmental thing? Who knows? But what's my point? As much as there was privilege in these settings, there's also much that we were robbed of. So it's not to say that because I went to such a school that I'm at this point of the hierarchy of needs. You may find that I actually am even baseless because there is a correlation between one's social class, for the most part, and their understanding of culture. So if you speak to someone from the village about Wanoyere, like what's their mutupo, they
What's
can
that towards?
probably explain it more,
Yeah.
right? The relationships in the family, the different words that we have, the different numbers. I can count to 100 in French now, but I can't do that in Shona.
Ooh.
That's the example. So these are small things. And again, in Mauritius, I was hearing people speaking French for the first time, Creole, and I said, what do we speak? Of course, I know the languages we speak. How come I'm not speaking those languages? So it's not to prejudice someone by what language they speak or what they wear, if it's a hijab, if it's a dashiki. But again, identity. Those are different things that point to who people are. So for me, I probably speak better English than some people in the United Kingdom or
Mm.
in America. But if I'm in Zimbabwe, I can't even speak Shona as fluently. This is a
Mhm.
problem. But the people that went to certain schools, let's say the local government schools, you'll find that they were maybe even taught in Shona, which is great, which is a good thing. I'm not saying English is bad. Being bilingual is good, but there's also things that people who went to those sort of schools benefited from that we lack. We look down on our people. Others don't. We were told that we are the best. And which is a good thing for self-esteem, but it's good to believe in yourself, but not to be told that you're better than someone else. That is a problem. So,
But you see the thing, just listening to your story, man. I mean, your life story and your experience have so much value, especially for people that have an understanding of both worlds. And even though in your world you because one thing that really stands out to me is this: sometimes the people who feel like outsiders early, like you were obviously set aside in life, become the best storytellers and the bridge builders later, because they don't want whatever that happened to them happen to the rest of the other people, whereas those that were in the center of it all might not have seen anything the wrong with what was happening, and they would never store themselves as in, are we outside or are we inside? They were just content, in their own sort of little space. Now, do you see that sort of connection in your own journey? Because I'm noticing here a scenario where you are this kid that grew up in this space where pretty much everything was meant to go right, which it did, but somehow some of these things now gave you the ammunition and the story that you are now telling the world today.
100%. And, it's not even limited to Zimbabwe. prosper.
Right.
In Mauritius, I did a part-time job working at the mall as a sales representative. Now, at that level, you earn minimum wage. And so the people you're going to work with are going to be part of the majority of the population, right? Quite frankly. So even at that point, the people that I socialized with are not only limited to the people who go to this university that I met. I mean, even back in Zim, before I came to university, I worked as a carpenter. So that's a blue collar job, right? So my friends were at the factory. I wore a t-shirt. I always had sawdust on me every day. But those were some of the best times of my life. And those are still guys, some of them I still talk to them today. So I like the words that you use, bridge builders. I think there's a massive opportunity as a country to remove this classism and come together. Zimbabwe is spoken about all over the world. It is amazing the amount people say, oh, it's a great country, it's a great country. And you're like, well, it is, but could be better. But we are divided as a people, and the value that could be extracted from building these bridges between us and seeing what are you guys doing good, what are we doing good, what are we both doing bad, what vision can we both work towards, a united end. So I really like the word that you use about bridge building, and that is what I'm trying to do. You're very right about that.
Absolutely. And I mean, even though I'm trying here, with everything, even when we started, I was like, I actually had to ask you which I didn't know how to ask, but I asked you in a way that you then told me, oh, wait a minute, my name is just based on where I'm from, but I'm actually this. All right. So it's one of those things that as soon as I don't know what is that though, and I haven't been there in a very long time. But like I told you, whenever we meet, it's always which side of the road are you from? Are you this or you that? And because your name says this, so that means automatically you're supposed to be that. Whereas there's people like you that completely present as somebody from a whole different side of the country, whereas you're not from there. It must have been difficult for you.
Well, difficult in what sense? Can you clarify
As
that
in,
a
you
little
had
bit?
to explain yourself all the time that no, I'm not Ndebele. I'm actually Shona. I
Yes.
did with you, right? You know what I mean? Like half of the time, all the time, somebody would just probably just break out in Ndebele, and you'd be like, "Oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. It's just the name."
I think it's a natural. I think it's a natural thing. I mean, yesterday, as I told you, I was with some Mozambicans. Once I
Yes.
said the name Inacio, they started speaking Portuguese, and I said, "No, unfortunately, I don't speak Portuguese." Uh, what is difficult though, and I'm sure you've experienced it in Australia, is when people start when they assume your country before they even know you. So they'll come up to you. I've had this experience. They come to say Nigeria, Ghana, and I don't like that. That was difficult for me at the start. But in terms of Zimbabwe, I don't think it's difficult. I think it's more, I understand that it is a Ndebele sounding name. So it's not difficult. I think, if anything, it just tells us how much more there is to learn about uh, our culture. That if someone has a certain type of name, it does not mean that they speak a certain language. And that the lesson there is that we must not be shallow. So if I see Prosper, his surname is Taruvinga, maybe you married an Australian lady, a white lady perhaps, or one of the the original peoples of Australia. And maybe your child has never been to Zimbabwe. Maybe in your household you don't speak Shona, and now your child has a surname Taruvinga, but are they Shona? Are they Zimbabwean? That becomes a whole other conversation. What's their culture? If it's Zimbabwe plus Australia, and then they're a mixture of both, who do they then become? So, is it difficult? No, but it tells us that we don't really acknowledge the depth of our culture. We just take a word and say, must be Shona, must be this, and there's so much more wealth we could extract from just a name, like I just gave you as an example.
I like that. Now, I mean, obviously, what you've just explained in my household, when the World Cup is on, yeah, some of us, don't necessarily have to talk to the other people because they're of the opposite team and things of that nature. You know what I mean? Or when we're having breakfast, it's like United Nations in my household there, right? But if someone is actually watching this and they're feeling maybe disconnected from their roots, their identity or purpose, and not because of their own choosing, but from the examples that you've given, how can maybe following what you're doing at Rwendo help them?
So that's an amazing question. That then speaks to anyone who, let's say, watches this and says, okay, where do I start? I'm a maybe I'm a Kenyan living in Russia who's come across this interview. I've never been to Kenya, but I want to reconnect. So the starting point was actually this. I studied this, did some research on it, and there's many different people. Let's use Zimbabwe as an example. There's Zimbabweans living in Zimbabwe. There are Zimbabweans like me, Masalad, who grew up with all of this, who can't speak Shona, can't speak Ndebele, but speak amazing English. There's Zimbabweans who went to government schools. There are those who wanted a better life and could afford to go out and had the opportunity to go out. There are those who do not have the opportunity to go out but want to go out. So it's just important to understand the different dynamics and the different profiles of people that we have. Because if we speak about Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe, that could be addressed from an institutional angle, where we look at the government and we look at other maybe non-profit organizations or profit-oriented businesses that can do something. Then there's the diaspora, which maybe does not benefit or doesn't, there's no institutions, local institutions that will do anything for people outside. Now, as Rwendo, it is a profit-oriented business, although I have not monetized it yet. My mission is, whether you're in Zimbabwe or outside, to then bring a platform where I can present this information to you. So what I wish to have for people is kind of a compass. And this is a long-term strategy that I have in terms of the things that I want to offer different people. For now, it's primarily through media. So I've got my YouTube channel and I've got my Instagram platform where I research and I create content. Because as you know, content is the new thing of our generation. That's where everybody is. So by researching and then using my gift of communication, I hope to be able to give people that information. The challenge with social media is that you can post something today and then a different topic tomorrow. So when you now have 1,000 posts, where do you start? You just kind of start in the middle, somewhere random. And I'm planning on building a platform like a website or an application where this can be more structured. Now we need to tap into our old people as well in Zimbabwe, because they are the libraries of our culture. And with time, they are going to soon start to leave us. And more of us who grew up in lower density parts or away from our roots are going to know less about our culture, and that will be diluted. So capturing them through interviews, through documentaries, putting that down, putting it in a structured format, chronological order. And one of the things I'm planning on doing is creating an ed tech app that can gamify and story tell around these things, as opposed to just writing a 10,000 page textbook on who are you. So that's what I would say for someone who is going to watch this. Where do you start? I would advise them to subscribe to the platforms that I mentioned, the YouTube page and Instagram, where I'm constantly putting out information, and also speak to your relatives. That's something else. If it's outside of myself, speak to your relatives. Ask your mom, your dad, your aunt, your friend, and that starts something. And you can always build on that. And I hope that Rwendo can play a part in doing that. And as you said, it exists to build African pride. So once someone is proud of who they are, they can then do anything. They can achieve anything from that point.
You see, as a father myself, I mean, you did touch up on the kids, and how it is for so many other people that are just maybe growing up now without that point of reference. Because I viscerally believe that representation matters. If you see people like yourself in positions or in places that you could aspire to be, it would actually, make you see that certain things are possible. And I think we don't have enough of that out there for people to say, hey, if he looks like me, if he came from where I came from and is doing exactly like what he's doing, then I too can be, do, and have a happier existence. And I think the work that you're doing matters. It really needs, a lot of support. And like you said, people that believed in you before were the people that then helped you pass your accounting. Now, I wanted to let you know that I visually believe in what you're doing, because so many people are just wondering generalities out there. They have no place they can plug in and actually call home. And, if you don't stand for anything, you fall for whatever. So thank you, man, for the work that you're doing. I don't know if you realize the magnitude of the work that you actually need to do in order for this to come to fruition.
I really appreciate that, Prosper. And I can believe in myself as much as I want to, but hearing it from you really does make a difference. And it just brings that same feeling I mentioned from my teacher. So thank you for saying that to me, number one. And thank you for having me on the platform, because that is a bigger vote of confidence. That is an example of saying, okay, this is something I'm going to take an action on it beyond just saying that you believe in it. And I definitely do see the magnitude of it. There's a lot of work to be done, and I believe it's an unexplored, maybe not unexplored, but it's a big topic in today's world. And I don't see many entities or platforms out there that are doing this. So I do hope that the work that I do can inspire people, and I hope that it can have a tangible impact. And one thing that I want to do in future as well is to work with institutions and organizations that are in a position to be of influence. So, for example, it may be ZimSick, for example. Why don't we have a talk on what the national educational curriculum is? And is it tailored to us as Zimbabweans? What if we have the ATS schools, the private schools, right? There's a body that oversees them. Why don't we have a conversation and say, what do you teach these children about Zimbabwe? They know more about Australia and all of this than they do about their own country, right? Why can't we have a conversation with different institutions like that? Even if it's financial institutions. There's actually a video I'm looking to upload soon where I say Africa doesn't need universities. I believe we should have an apprenticeship system instead, and that it can be a way to combat unemployment. So there's so many different ideas that I have, and people like yourself are also in a position to advise and to say, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? And it's everyone stands to benefit from everyone. So whether that's someone younger than me, older than me, in a different field, I can always benefit from someone, because the mission is what's important at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely. Now I do see that old soul inside of you, because the work that you're tackling, this is the kind of stuff that people have voted into power for, but I don't think they're there for that, So if I could say this in a word or two, you're literally giving people back to themselves, because when somebody discovers their identity, then they know what's good for them, and obviously can stand up for themselves in order to get whatever opportunities that are aligned to them. But if they are not centered or grounded, obviously wherever the wind goes, there they are. So with that, thank you so much, Mthulisi, and thank you so much for your time on the show today.
Thank you so much, Prosper. It feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes, and there's so much more that could be, discussed. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue the conversations in future, because just like the books behind you, there's so many thoughts and ideas in my mind that I'd love to explore. And also to you, thank you for having such a platform and for pursuing what you are pursuing, because without people like yourself, I don't have a platform, and everybody else that you have interviewed as well. So thank you for what you're doing, and please do continue that mission. And I will make sure to uh, blast your name on all the platforms I have and get people to tune in to the great work you're doing.
Not a problem. I appreciate that. And thank you so much. And if you're watching this right now and maybe something Mthulisi said resonates with you, I want you to answer this question in the comments. What's the part of your identity or story that you feel the world hasn't fully seen yet? Because so many of us have stories, books, movies that we can put out there, but just because we don't know who we are or whose we are not strong enough or empowered enough to actually go out there and create for and relate to our own. I want us to start this conversation now. It's been long overdue. And I think people like Mthulisi that are doing this will need our support. Okay. And I think that's where transformation begins. So if you found this conversation meaningful, share it with somebody who might need to reconnect with who they are and what it is that they stand for. That way, we can actually spread this message to those that are ready to tackle this conversation, not just anybody else. And also, if somebody shared this episode with you, I just want you to take 5 minutes today and ask yourself, what do I care about deeply enough to build something around? Because so many of us are not creating just because we don't know who we are. I don't know what you're going to do with this information. But until next time, bye for now.